continue with Statifying Football. This is week 2 already of the college football season. These are the noon games. Starting off an 11 a.m. game, Illinois and Virginia should be a pretty interesting non-conference game. Illinois, they lost to UTSA 37-30 last week. Artur Sitkowski, 266 passing, 3 touchdowns. Isaiah Williams, 8 catches for 101 yards there. Virginia, they owned William & Mary 43-0. Brennan Armstrong, 339 passing, 2 touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. They had 545 total yards. Defensively, they only allowed 183 yards, and they got a safety there. I'm going to go with, I think this could be a pretty good game. Illinois did lose to a decent UTSA team. It was an upset, but UTSA was 7-5 last year. But I think Virginia will have a little bit too much offense for Illinois, but I actually think this will be pretty close. Maybe come down to the last second field goal, touchdown, that kind of thing. But I think Virginia pulls out in the end. All right, Western Kentucky and Army. Western Kentucky went off on Tennessee Martin, 59-21. Bailey Zappi, the transfer that I was talking about last week, 424 yards, 7 touchdown passes, only 1 interception. Jarrett Stearns, 7 catches, 107 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They had 587 yards. Now they're playing an Army team that is basically the exact opposite offense. Whereas Western Kentucky is an air raid, pass it all the time. Army is a triple option team that runs basically every play. And they use that very effectively against Georgia State in a 43-10 win where they ran for 258. Quarterback Christian Anderson, 40 yards passing and a touchdown, and 55 yards rushing and a touchdown. Defensively, Andre Carter himself had 3 sacks in that game. This should be a pretty fun game. It just really depends. If Army can keep the ball and keep that Western Kentucky offense off, then Army could win. Army has a really strong defense, but I'm not sure that that Army will be able to completely stop Western Kentucky. I'm going to give Western Kentucky a slight edge here, but this is going to be a really fun game. Could potentially be high scoring if both offenses just get going, but it should be a very close game, and I'll give Western Kentucky a little bit of an edge. Virginia Military Institute against Kent State. Kent State played okay against Texas A&M for a while, but couldn't hold on. They lost 41-10. Dustin Crum, their quarterback, he's normally great. He did not have a very good game. 12 of 26, 89 yards, and two interceptions. They did run for 226 yards, and they forced 5 turnovers in that game. They shouldn't have any trouble with Virginia Military Institute. So I got Kent State winning that one. All right, the biggest game of the day, Oregon and Ohio State. Oregon, they had a close game against Fresno, which I thought I put them on upset alert. They did come out with a win against Fresno, 31-24. Quarterback Anthony Brown, 172 passing and a touchdown, plus 56 rushing and a touchdown. Defensively, they had 4 sacks and forced 3 turnovers in that game, which they're going to need to do against Ohio State. Ohio State struggled early on against Minnesota. C.J. Stroud, though, his first ever start, he showed why he's the starter in that 45-31 win. He had 294 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Mine Williams ran for 125 and a touchdown. Chris Olave, 4 catches, 117 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And defensively, they had a fumble return for a touchdown. Oregon has to travel to Ohio State. This will be a really, really fun game to watch. Could be really high scoring. I'll give Ohio State a little bit of an edge here. Both teams played good teams last week, but I'll give Ohio State an edge. But this should be a great game. All right, you got Alabama State and Auburn. Auburn had no trouble with Akron, 60-10, and Brian Harson's first game as the head coach at Auburn. Bo Nix, 20-22, 275, 3 touchdowns. Tank Bigsby, 119 rushing and 2 touchdowns, 612 yards of offense. Defensively, they had 6 sacks and a safety. They shouldn't have any trouble putting away Alabama State by halftime in that game. South Carolina against East Carolina. South Carolina had a nice win against Eastern Illinois, 46-0. Zeb Dolan, only 121 passing, but 4 touchdown passes. Zaquandre Wright ran for 128 and a touchdown. Defensively, they had a pick 6 and only allowed 109 yards of offense. East Carolina, they lost to Appalachian State, a really good App State team, 33-19. Holton Ahlers, 295 passing, 2 touchdowns and a pick. This is a little bit of a tricky game for South Carolina because East Carolina, they do have a good quarterback, but I'll give South Carolina a slight edge there. It should be a good game. All right, Pitt and Tennessee. Pitt, they destroyed UMass 51-7. Kenny Pickett, 272 passing, 2 touchdowns. Defensively, had 5 sacks. Tennessee, that new look, fast-paced offense, they looked pretty good, at least early on against Bowling Green. They won 38-6. Joe Milton, 140 passing and a touchdown, and ran for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyron Evans ran for 116 and a touchdown. Jabari Small ran for 116 and a touchdown. They ran for 326 yards. This is where it will be an interesting game. Pittsburgh normally has a good defense, especially on their defensive line. They're usually one of the best defensive lines in the country, statistically speaking. In Tennessee, they are in a new offense. They're still kind of trying to get those kinks going. It's got Pitt favored, but maybe I'm just going to let the offense blind me. But I'll go with Tennessee in that game, but that should be a really close, really good game to watch. All right, Kennesaw State and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had a last-second loss to Northern Illinois, 22-21. Jordan Yates, 135 passing and a touchdown, plus 40 rushing and a touchdown. And they did run for 283 yards in the game. This shouldn't have any trouble with Kennesaw State. Norfolk State and Wake Forest. Wake Forest destroyed Old Dominion 42-10. Sam Hartman, 188 passing, 3 touchdown passes. And they had a kick return for a touchdown there. They shouldn't have any trouble putting away Norfolk. Youngstown State, Michigan State. Michigan State had kind of a surprising win, I thought, against Northwestern. Surprising in how they just destroyed them. They beat them 38-21. The Wake Forest running back Kenneth Walker went off. He ran for 264 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game as they put up 511 yards of offense. And defensively, they had 4 sacks in that game. They should have no trouble putting away Youngstown State by halftime. Miami of Ohio and Minnesota could be interesting here because Minnesota is losing Mohamed Ibrahim. He had 163 rushing yards in only 3 quarters against Ohio State. He's hurt and he's done for the season, unfortunately. They did lose that game to Ohio State 45-31. Tanner Morgan, 205 passing and a touchdown. Miami of Ohio, they lost to Cincinnati. They weren't really close in that one, 49-14. A.J. Meyer was pretty terrible, 9 of 28 passing. Defensively, they did force 3 turnovers and they had a pick 6. So if they want to keep it close against Minnesota, they're going to have to do that. But I'm not so sure they'll be able to pull that one out. So I'll go with Minnesota to get that win. All right, Indiana State and Northwestern. Northwestern lost to Michigan State 38-21. Hunter Johnson had a really good game, 275 passing and 3 touchdowns. Maybe they'll have more of a passing game this year than usual. They should be able to get off that losing one game loss and get a win there. All right, Tulsa and Oklahoma State. Tulsa finally lost the game they were supposed to last year. If anybody saw my videos, there were about 4 games they literally won. They should have won, and the conference even said they should have lost, and the conference even then said the next day they should have lost. But they finally did to 1AA UC Davis, 19-17. Davis Brand, 201 passing, 2 picks. Generic Prince had a good game, 179 yards passing and a touchdown, but they turned over 3 times, which hurt them in that game. Oklahoma State, they kind of struggled against Missouri State, 1AA team, beating them 23-16. Shane Illingworth, 315 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Spencer Sanders, the Normer starter, he couldn't play because of COVID. He may be able to play this week. Tate Martin, 6 catches, 107, and a touchdown. Defensively, 5 sacks, 2 turnovers forced in that game. I mean, this still could be a pretty close game just because of Oklahoma State. If Spencer Sanders is on, they should be able to beat Tulsa pretty well. But either way, I'm going to have Oklahoma State winning that game. All right, Florida and USF. Florida, they did not look very good against Florida Atlantic. Yeah, they won 35-14, but Emory Jones is terrible. No wonder he wasn't a starter before now. 113 passing, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Added 75 rushing. Anthony Richardson, a true freshman quarterback, he looked really good. He only had 5 carries, but for 160 yards and a touchdown. Malik Davis ran for 104 and a touchdown. They had 400 rushing yards in that game. Defensively, they had 6 sacks with Zachary Carter having 3 of them and forced 2 turnovers. They're playing a USF team that didn't do anything against North Carolina State. They lost 45-0. 2 quarterbacks combined, 14 of 33 with 3 interceptions. Again, Florida shouldn't have... I kind of see this being the same game as they played against Florida Atlantic. Emory Jones, if he's playing, he clearly sucks. They should be able to win with a decent margin, but they probably won't. They'll probably look sloppy doing it in that game. All right, Morgan State and Tulane. Tulane almost came back to beat Oklahoma. They only lost 40-35. Michael Pratt had a great game, 296 passing, 3 touchdown passes, and 34 rushing yards with 1 rushing. They should have no trouble with Morgan State. Wyoming and Northern Illinois. Wyoming kind of struggled against 1AA Montana State. They did beat them though, 19-16. Sean Chambers, 196 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and ran for 51 yards. Northern Illinois had a nice win against Georgia Tech. They went for 2 with 38 seconds left and got it to win 22-21. Rocky Lombardi, 136 passing, 2 touchdowns. Harrison Whaley, 144 rushing and a touchdown. Defensively, they had 3 sacks in that game. This will be a pretty close game. I'm going to give Wyoming the slight edge. They've normally been one of the better teams in the Mountain West the past few years. They have a strong defense and a running game. But like I said, it could be close, but I'm going to go with Wyoming in the win. All right, Middle Tennessee State and Virginia Tech. Middle Tennessee State looked good against Monmouth, won 50-15. Bailey Hawkman, 215 passing, 3 touchdowns. Defensively, had 3 sacks, 4 turnovers, a pick 6, and a punt return for a touchdown. So clearly they can score in any which way, which is kind of the old school Beamer ball, which is what Virginia Tech used to do. And they had a really an upset win over number 10 North Carolina, 17-10. Braxton Burmeister, 169 passing, a touchdown, a pick, and 42 rushing and a touchdown. Defensively, they had 6 sacks and forced 3 turnovers there. This could be a pretty good game because Middle Tennessee normally has a good offense. Virginia Tech had a nice win against North Carolina, but they still couldn't do much offensively. So I'm going to put Virginia Tech on upset alert for this game. I'm going to say Virginia Tech does win, but don't be surprised if this is close into the 3rd quarter at least. All right, Duquesne and Ohio. Ohio lost to Syracuse 29-9. Curtis Work, 142 passing and a pick. Jerome Buckner, 7 catches, 102 yards. I think they should bounce back, and they should be a pretty strong MAC team and should be able to get a win here against Duquesne. All right, Toledo and Notre Dame. Toledo, they beat Norfolk State 49-10. Carter Bradley, 183 passing and a touchdown. Defensively, they had 2 block punt returns for touchdowns. This is what they're going to need to be a pretty decent Notre Dame team. Notre Dame, they had an 18-point lead in the 4th quarter against FSU. Let FSU come all the way back to tie it, and then Notre Dame finally won in overtime, 41-38. Jack Cohn, though, had a fantastic game. He's a transfer from Wisconsin. 366 passing, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Michael Meyer, one of the best tight ends maybe in the country, 9 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. Defensively, had 5 sacks and forced 3 turnovers there. This could be a really high-scoring game because Toledo normally has an offense that can put up points against anybody, even Notre Dame. And Notre Dame showed they gave up a lot against Florida State, who's kind of middling offensively. I still do think Notre Dame comes out with the victory there, but I'll say Notre Dame's on a small upset alert there. All right, Purdue and UConn. Purdue looked good against a pretty decent Oregon State team, 30-21. Jack Plummer, 313 passing and 2 touchdowns. David Bell, 8 catches, 134 yards. Payne Durham, 7 catches, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns there. UConn, they lost to 1AA Holy Cross, 38-28, and their coach, Randy Edsall, he has been fired. In that game, Jack Zergiotis, the quarterback, 17 of 41, 174, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, and 1 rushing. They had 4 turnovers. Defensively, they had 4 sacks, but I have a hard time seeing them keep up with Purdue, with a pretty good passing offense from Purdue. So I got Purdue pretty big in that one. All right, Robert Morris against Central Michigan, the last one of the noon games. They had a nice game against Missouri. They did only lose 34-24. I thought that game would be pretty close, and it was 24-all, and then pretty much in the 4th quarter, and then Missouri scored scored a little bit late. Jack Sermon, though, had a pretty nice game, 295, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Lou Nichols ran for 135 and a touchdown. Ja'Cory Sullivan, 8 catches, 102, and 2 touchdowns. They showed they could move it against a pretty good SEC team. They should have no trouble with Robert Morris here. So those are my noon picks. Check out all my other games and picks. Peace.